Welcome to this edition of Salem on the Move. I am your host, Mike McLaren, and today we're going to be talking about two tax measures that Oregonians will be voting on January 26, Measures 66 and Measure 67. With me to have that discussion are two guests, Kathy Gordon, who is a partner and a CPA with AKT, and Brent DeHart, a local businessman that has Salem Aviation and Fueling and Mission Street Shell as two of his locally owned businesses. So welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
So a big decision by Oregonians coming up on January 26th that feature two tax measures. And Kathy, if you would, maybe to start us out, just give us a description of what lies before the voters in those taxes.
Sure. The legislature recently passed these two laws. One affects individuals, and the other affects our businesses that we have here in Oregon. And the individuals are going to be hit with a higher tax rate. We're already at a 9% maximum tax rate, and those individuals who make $125,000 or $250,000 of taxable income now pay a higher tax rate than they have before. And on the corporate side, the businesses that we had in the past, they've for many years had a corporate minimum tax of $10, which is agreeable. This is a pretty low tax, and I mean, if you look nationwide, it's probably one of the lowest rates that we have, unless you had no tax at all.
Well, of course, 31 states don't have any tax at all,
Yeah,
so that's
there
important.
you go.
Now, 31 states say if you don't have any income,
Right.
you don't have to pay the tax.
Exactly.
So $10
Exactly.
is too low if you're going to establish one. But
Right. And so the legislatures raised the minimum tax to a minimum of now $150, and that would be on those businesses that are S corporations, partnerships, and LLCs. These are known as the pass-through type business entities. And then on the C corporation, those corporations that do pay tax themselves, they have a minimum tax as well, but their minimum tax now, instead of being based on taxable income, is going to be based on gross income. And so there's a highest minimum tax now of $100,000. And not only on top of that, the tax rate used to be at 6.6% for corporations, and now that also will be increased. So they're getting hit on two sides on the businesses.
good point. And it's important to note that Oregon has never had this type of tax. It's a gross receipts tax. We've gone 150 years without it, and I think a lot of listeners now are thinking, I've never heard of that. And the public's really not aware it hasn't gone through any sort of process to gain a coalition of support for a brand new type of taxation that Oregon's never had.
So Brent, well, I know you jumped right on in there, but you actually got started with this effort as a chief petitioner to get these taxes on the ballot where Oregonians would have the ability to actually vote on them. Would you describe what, and I think you just started on the gross receipts part, those aspects of the taxes that cause you the greatest concern?
Well, it's a complete fallacy that the legislature has either not realized or is trying to pass off that high sales somehow equate to an ability to pay. And you'll hear the phrase ability to pay. But we're looking at tough economic times. My industry and some of the representatives of industry that you represent have very small margins but high sales. I'm a gasoline dealer, so we sell a lot of gallons at pennies per gallon, and then of course you pay your attendants and so on and so forth. And I collect $1 million of excise taxes. Now I have to pay tax on the fact that I'm collecting taxes. But farmers are in this situation, car dealers, tough time for car dealers, losing money, probably a great number of them, but they're selling an expensive product. And I had a local car dealer tell me a few years ago, if I could only just make 2% on my car sales, 2%. And after that 2%, he has to pay all his expenses. He's not talking about taking it home. So we're really talking a fraction of a percent for a lot of these industries. And the tax would punish them for having slim margins and high sales. In tough economic times, this new taxation policy based on your sales and not how much cash is left over at the end of the day is really going to hurt businesses and cause layoffs and cause jobs. And it's going to hurt farmers, car dealers, grocers, gasoline dealers, and I'm sure you have other examples.
Right.
Well, let's talk about the job losses. We can futuristically say we are going to lose more jobs if these taxes are enacted here in the state of Oregon, but we have been really hit hard with the number of private sector job losses over the last 18 months or so. And I know, Brent, you have a graph there, but I think it's over 114,000 private sector jobs.
Yeah, these are the latest numbers. It's from the Employment Department, and the red line represents the number of jobs lost in the private sector. But up on top, the green line represents how government jobs are increasing. Well, unfortunately, everybody knows we're too dependent on income tax in this state, but it takes jobs on the red line to pay for every job on the green line and all the services that they represent. I mean, this is not about we don't want the services, we don't want any more taxes. This is not sustainable. We can't do this, and we can't pass public policy that's going to make that red line worse, and they know it's going to make it worse. So it's really inexplicable to me how this is a good idea. We can't take private sector jobs and further erode our ability to support the government. Those private sector jobs and all the income tax that they represent, that's where the legislature needs to focus on revitalizing this job market so that we can pay for all the jobs on the green line. We can't just add green lines on the green job. There we go. Jobs on the green line. There we go. That was backwards.
But I think it's important to underscore the fact, that, and you said it, and as we just underscore, those public sector jobs are important and we value them. And what we need to do is bring back the private sector jobs that create the revenue to sustain that. And if the taxes are implemented, now we start talking about those further job losses, which then create even a further
bigger
problem to try to bring that closer. Kathy, I'm curious, with a firm as large as AKT's that has a lot of folks out there as clients, what are you hearing from your clients, and how what you're hearing, how does that translate into whether those folks will be able to either retain jobs that they have now or even still be here in Oregon?
Right. I actually talked to several of my partners at the firm and what they're hearing from their clients as well. And we have a broad range of industries in the firm, and the word, and this seems to be across all industries, is that if it's not a job loss, at a minimum, we're going to have to cut back on benefits, on compensation, on anything that we would have given to our employees is going to be cut. Healthcare is an issue right now, and this is just being compounded by the new premium that we're going to have to pay on the health insurance. And so maybe employees are going to have to pay for their health insurance where in the past the employer has paid for that. So and especially, as Brent mentioned, it's the thinly margined companies that are really going to be hurt the hardest. And I mean, they're going to pass it right down to their employees, and they're going to pass on these costs to the public, and the cost of the product's going to go up as well.
If they can. You know, Mike, you look for examples, and the dairy farmers are a good example right now, and farmers describe of having 1,000 cows, and you can't stop milking them, but they're losing money on their milk because of the market conditions. So it's costing them $13 to $15 to produce the milk. They're selling a ton of product at $12. And you can't make an argument that they owe the government more money when they're losing money on every one of their sales. It's crazy. Lithium Motors, and everybody knows 2008 was a horrible time to be in the car business. They sold it's an Oregon business, and they sold about $23 million worth of cars. Well, they lost $3 million last year. And then the only answer is I have to cut back on salesmen. I have to slough off or close down operations that aren't making money. Right. I have to cut back on maintenance guys that do repairs. They lost $3 million. And this bill would have them pay $20,000 more in income tax, even though they didn't have any net income.